Welcome to the Nerd Planet. Today, I will tell you about a few fantasy books that might be of interest to you. I will start with The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. We follow the main character Caroline, who at first seems like a normal human being with her own quirks, but we see that actually she is different, and soon enough we find out that she was actually adopted along with some other children by a strange man who they now call Father capital F. And the story itself begins when Father disappears and no one knows where he is, what happened to him. That's a mystery. I have to admit that the first 70 pages, I was confused. No, honestly, actually the first 200 pages, I was quite confused. If you read this book, did you feel the same? Please let me know. I cannot be the only person who was that confused, okay? I could not really understand what was happening, why we are shown, what we are shown exactly, what is happening to all the characters that we see, and we see quite a few, honestly speaking. We do not really understand the story of Caroline just yet, and normally I would actually DNF such a book when I'm, confused for so long. And mind me, I read plenty of books, plenty of fantasy books where you just have to dive into a completely new world with new rules, with new things that do not even exist in the real world. But usually, the authors give you at least some kind of explanation. Here, I didn't get any for the longest time. But somehow I stuck around. Something was forcing me to continue reading this book. And at some point, I read the last 300 pages in one sitting, in one evening, yeah. And at the end, after reading this book, after having such a weird feeling about it, I do not know how to rate it, honestly. I still do not know. I did not hate it, now that I have all the answers, finally. I did not love it. I still find it weird, but I want to recommend it to people. I don't know, I'm confused. Again, if you read this book, please let me know how you felt. What do you think? What your rating is, because I don't know. I honestly am very confused still. But what I appreciated about this book is, first of all, the magic system. We see that each adopted child has a catalog. It's a sort of a branch of sciences that this person is dedicating their life to. And it can be medicine, it can be languages, it can even be something like seeing into the future and predicting the future. And there is one rule, and that is that you cannot look into other catalogs, you cannot research or learn outside of your own catalog. I don't think it's going to be a spoiler to tell you that, for example, Caroline, our main character, her catalog is languages, and she literally speaks all the languages there are, even the dead ones. So it's pretty cool, honestly. It's this intellectualism or intellectual magic that I appreciated. Also, since we have catalogs, since we talk about knowledge, since we talk about learning and studying, there is a library. We do not, again, for the longest time, really understand what the library is. It is somewhere always in the background. It is somewhere something mysterious. At the end, the author will give you the answers, will explain how the library works a little bit. But if you love the kind of magic that is based on learning, on knowledge, on having to be in a library, I think you might enjoy this book quite a lot. Second thing that I appreciated about this book is that it's quite unique. Honestly, the story itself felt very unique to me. I might be a silly cookie, I don't know, but again, I could not tell how the story would end. I did not predict where the story would lead at all. Maybe because it's a bit confusing and weird, or it's me, I don't know. Regardless, the story felt very unique. Personally, I have not read anything quite similar, even though the author uses the elements that we all know: a library, adopted children. At first, actually, I thought that maybe the story is gonna be something like the Umbrella Academy. And while you see certain similarities, it's still not the same. It's quite unique. What I did not appreciate as much is, first of all, the story was a little bit confusing. I told you I could not understand what was happening for the first 200 pages, more or less. And again, I told you that I've read books where an author would just throw you into the world and you have to figure it out by yourself, and I enjoyed it, okay? But here you have multiple mysteries running at once. The mystery of the father, what's happened to him, who he is, why he adopted the children, and so on and so forth. There's the mystery of Carolyn and her plan and her stance on this book at all. There is the mystery of like 15 different characters that appear in the book, if not more, later on. There's also the mystery of the magic system itself, because, okay, yeah, we understand there's the library, there are catalogs, but obviously you do not know at first how exactly they work or what their rules are. It all takes time, and the author does not really bother with explaining what is what. You just learn along with some random bits of stories or flashbacks or characters talking, and again, honestly, I felt like it was more confusing than I would expect. Let's put it this way. And why I'm talking about this, not because I'm hating on a confusing book or I don't like challenging books or something. No, it's more that I understand that some people might not stick around to find out what the whole story is about. So, if you are on page 70, page 100, and you're like not sure if you should continue or not, if it's not a strong DNF for you, maybe give it a chance. Give it a chance. The author will explain things, I promise you, the author will. That is just a disclaimer. Talking about disclaimers, violence. This book is quite violent. I have a feeling that the synopsis of the book makes it feel a little bit different, maybe a bit more even cozy because of all the library and catalogs. No, it's a very violent book. Also, you will notice that the topic of grape is used here as a character building and all. I would say that the acts or the scenes of violence, they do not distribute it evenly throughout the book. They just appear in random places to show some of the characters, but they are quite intense. Alright, you still need to be aware of them, let's put it this way. I will just give you an example. There is this one scene in a police department where one character just unalives lots of people, and the author spends a few pages describing, the intestine hanging from the lamps from the ceiling, the way a human eye gets destroyed by a bullet shot, where the pieces of the brain flies. So, if you're sensitive to these kind of descriptions, just be aware that they do exist and they are present in this book. The writing itself, alright, that was quite engaging. I told you, something kept me going despite being very confused and frustrated with this confusion even. But I do have to add that at some point, characters, while I could see distinct behavioral patterns, they felt a little bit the same when they spoke. Because many characters, even if they're from completely different backgrounds, they use the same phrases or the same responses. And at some point, I had a little bit of a dissonance in my head, because I see that they clearly behave differently. They're all very distinct, but they speak the same. That threw me off a couple of times. At the end, I would actually recommend you this book. It has a unique storyline. It's quite confusing, but engaging. This is the kind of book that keeps you wondering, that keeps you questioning things, because you really want to know what each element, what each piece of information mean. So even when you do not read this book, you're not actively reading this book, I mean, you're washing the dishes or whatever else, you still come back to the book and you try to understand what means what. So it's quite an interesting reader's experience. This book just catches you and does not let you go until you finish. Next on the menu is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. It is year 1348 in the French setting. And all around us is the Black Death, the plague itself. There are three main characters that we follow and whose POVs we read the most. Thomas, a disgraced knight, a forever drunk priest, and a young girl who seems like sees angels. She insists that the plague and the violence are actually the residue of what is happening on or in heaven. She claims that Lucifer and his fallen angels have declared a war on heaven. And it shows up on planet Earth. In the meantime, we're traveling around France with the main characters, and we see all the villages and cities ravaged by the plague, by the violence, by the consequences of this terrible disease. And it's truly horrific and devastating. When you read this book, you feel hopeless, you feel desperate, you really don't see any light, any hope once again. It's the world filled with survivalist violence. And that's where the book's characters start questioning the necessity of violence. They start questioning why God would allow people to suffer this much, including the people who actually directly serve him, that is, the priests. As I mentioned, one of our main characters, is a priest himself. At some point, the book also starts questioning whether the people who work in church are actually good people, and whether they're actually following what they preach. I enjoy such discussions, I have to say, but I cannot tell you, obviously, to which conclusions the book leads us or what elements or events our main characters use to prove or disprove their beliefs, because that would be a spoiler. You have to find out by yourself. But tell me, this description so far, has it made you consider reading this book? At the same time, do not expect a philosophical discussion. This book primarily uses religion to actually just set the mood, set the scene, make it all look even more horrific, atrocious, more scary. So religion is more of a tool here. I mean, it literally is in the premise. It is a part of the world building, if I may say. It's literally related to at least two main characters very directly. So it's more of a tool than the point of discussion, if I may say. But still I enjoyed some of the questions that the characters raised in the book. I'm mentioning that religion is used to intensify the horror elements of the book, and I'll give you one example. There's this one scene where the main characters are passing by a church, and they are looking for shelter because it's night outside. It's just not safe to be outside right now. You have to protect yourself from whatever is living right now in the darkness, in the night. And they're passing by a church, right? And we see in the church a bunch of statues of saints. And these statues, they're cursing, they are promising the most atrocious things to the main characters. They're about to attack the main characters, basically. And honestly, I had the goosebumps. Culturally, we see church as a safe, hopeful, sanctuary-like place But here in this book, it's just stripped of all safety, you know? And it just intensifies the horror elements that I told you about, but also the desperate, hopeless feeling inside of you. Anyway, I recommend reading this book. If you like horror books with religion elements, if you enjoy following some morally great characters, and obviously if you do not mind the scenes or the descriptions of violence, grape, rotten, bloated bodies, chopped heads, and all that period. Going into this book, you have to understand that this is, again, a horror book with lots of violence and gore. If that's something you enjoy, go for it. If this is something you cannot stand, let me recommend you something else. Last but definitely not least is The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. As you see, I actually have this story as a part of the Arcanum Unbounded collection. And I have to give you a disclaimer. I am a Brandon Sanderson's fan. Yeah. So I never know how objectively I judge his books. Although reviewing books overall is quite a subjective matter. What do you think? This is a novella. And I have to say, I was just slightly bit scared / skeptical about reading it. I am used to Brandon's character building, exquisite world building in a span of 1,000 pages. When I see a short story of 100 to 100 pages, I'm a bit unsure. I don't know if it's really enough for Sanderson's to actually tell what he wants to tell us. I was not sure if this book was gonna hit the same. Well, it did. The story is happening in the same world as Elantris, but the magic is seemingly different. Our main character, Shy, is a forger, and that means that she can copy or recreate a certain item by rewriting their history, sort of changing their essence. And we meet her at the point when she is convicted and condemned to death. However, for her fantastic skills, she is given just one chance to leave, and she has to leave. She has to recreate the Emperor's soul. What happened to the Emperor, you will find out in the story itself. She takes on the challenge, and we follow her trying to recreate the Emperor's soul. It is all spiced up by the fact that her skill, the forgery, is considered to be an abomination. I genuinely like the magic system. The whole idea of rewriting something past, rewriting something's history to create a new item is fascinating to me. And I think that despite the story being short, it actually managed to show us the magic system quite well, and I think Sanderson actually managed to explain the magic in a way that made sense and it felt very thought through. I also very much enjoyed Shy's exploration of Emperor's soul, of his character, of his personality, even though she's never met him really. I enjoyed seeing her endeavor to get deeper into the essence of this person and the whole discovery of another person's soul added a layer to the magic system itself, because I could see in the text that the forgery is not just abomination, just a random magical skill that appeared out of nowhere, something completely unnatural, but actually it's an art of understanding the core of things and humans. You really need to know the world around you, how that world works. And when you forge a soul, you also need to understand the psychology of characters. You need to understand the psychology of human being, the intricacies of a human brain. At the end, forgery to me seemed like a kind of selfless magic system, because you have to be very observant. You have to sort of strip out your prejudice and your shaded perceptions of the world and the humans, and you really have to stop listening perhaps to just yourself or focus on yourself. You have to shift that focus to the world around you, to the humans around you, because that's how you will understand. It's really a shift from the self to the contemplation of the surrounding environment. That's the only way I believe you can actually master this art of forgery. The negative thing about this book is that it's too short. I want more. I want more of Shy. I want more of the magic system, but yeah, that's all we have so far. By the way, talking about having more, I recommend to read this book before you read The Lost Metal. I won't tell more. All in all, I recommend all the stories that I've mentioned in this video. They're all different, with distinct techniques to achieve the story goals, with distinct feeling, with distinct approach to the storytelling, but nonetheless, they're all worth your attention. Have you read any of these books? If yes, what do you think? Do you agree, disagree? Have you noticed something I haven't? And have you read any books that are similar to what I've mentioned? If yes, would you recommend any and why? Thank you for watching this video. Consider liking it and subscribing to my channel. I see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.